Mehdi Hasan. Mehdi Hasan, it's a long story, Mehdi. Mehdi Hasan was one of the commentators that was very critical of Israel, still very critical of Israel. But the moment that it appeared that Kamala Harris was the nominee, Mehdi Hasan was ready to just jump right on board. Otherwise, you're going to get a Trump. He was one of those people. Well, now Mehdi Hasan is on Joy Reid, and he's actually trying to lie about some of the Muslim voters, saying that they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. You know, now all of a sudden, Joy Reid, all of you guys, now all of a sudden you care so much about those Palestinian people. Oh my God, look at who Donald Trump just appointed as the Israel person. Look who he just appointed as the Israel ambassador. What's going to happen to those Palestinians? But when Kamala Harris was the nominee and Joe Biden was president and still is president now, you didn't have that same amount of sympathy. You would talk about it every now and then, but you didn't have the same amount of concern that you have right now, Joy. You didn't have that same amount of shock that you do now that Mike Huckabee has been announced as that pick for Donald Trump, which again does not surprise me. I told you both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris were pro-Israel, and they were going to continue to help and aid Israel. But now that Trump is about to come in, you'll notice the rhetoric is starting to change, and Mehdi Hasan is going along with it. He's on this show with Joy. You got to hear this, guys. He's going to try to make it seem like the voters were dumb and didn't know what they were doing. Let's go on.
The plight of the Palestinian people will soon be in the hands of former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, who was Trump's choice for U.S. ambassador to Israel, and a man who does not believe Palestinians even exist. The selection of Huckabee, a right-wing Christian evangelical who is an unapologetic Christian Zionist, is an open acknowledgement that a two-state solution, that's dead. Here's what Huckabee thinks about regional issues.
Pause. Now, all of a sudden, it's okay for her to criticize Christian Zionists. Why didn't she criticize Joe Biden for being a Christian Zionist? Didn't hear her say anything about Joe Biden being a Christian Zionist, but because this is someone that Trump appointed, now all of a sudden you have a critique of Christian Zionism. You didn't before. It's how the game is played. I hope all these people get fired. I'm gonna keep it real with the ratings and everything. Joy, Anderson, all you guys, I hope all these people get fired. Won't feel no shade because you just been lying and lying and lying.
Basically, I mean, there really is no such thing as, and I have to be careful in saying this because people will really get upset, there's really no such thing as a Palestinian.
I think it's time for us to quit playing this pretentious game that there's going to be a two-state solution where both sides share the same country and real estate and streets, because they're not.
There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities.
So everybody hear this, right? So Mike Huckabee is absolutely terrible. I have no shame in saying that. How can you say there's no West Bank when it's literally on the map, right? So these are just blatant lies. Again, he's another one, Christian Zionist. But that being said, where was this same criticism when these comments about Israel first and screw the Palestinian, all this stuff, when those comments came from Josh Shapiro, where was this criticism, Joy? You didn't critique him because he's a Democrat and because Kamala Harris was considering him to be a VP. That's the thing. It's not just Mike Huckabee. It's Richie Torres. Why didn't you say anything about some of the nasty, disgusting things that Richie Torres has said about the Palestinians? Why didn't you say anything, Joy? Because he's a Democrat, because he's a part of her party. And MSNBC is a left-leaning show. Let's continue.
That's pretty clear. The news of Huckabee's selection was celebrated by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's most extremist coalition members because he is also a huge proponent of settlements in the West Bank. Huckabee will be joined by Steve Witkoff, who will step into the role of envoy to the Middle East. Witkoff has no prior experience in Middle East politics, but he too is a big backer of settlements, and he likes to golf with Trump, which is all the expertise you really need in this upcoming administration.
And we're going to pause here. And thank you for mentioning Biden again, Ashura, because here's the thing. Biden also wasn't willing to criticize the settlements. See, these are the things they're not calling out. Joe Biden also didn't really have a problem with the settlements. So I don't know, Kamala said something about it when she was questioned about it. But for the most part, the Biden-Harris administration, they weren't touching this issue. Had it not been for October 7th, they probably wouldn't have been questioned about this issue. But Joe Biden really was not against the settlements. Antony Blinken, not really against the settlements. Joy Reid wants you to think they were. They weren't.
Joining me now is Mehdi Hasan, editor-in-chief and CEO of Zateo. Mehdi, you, before the election, made the very clear-eyed assessment that folks who really don't like the Biden policies on Israel and Palestine are going to really hate it if Trump takes over. You turned out to be absolutely right. Let's talk about this new team. Your thoughts on them. Huckabee et al.
So this is Joy Reid trying to run cover for the genocide that's happened under Biden and Kamala. And this is not, I'm not here to make excuses for Donald Trump and his team at all. What I am here to show you, though, is that they don't really, till this now, Joy still don't want to call it a genocide. Still don't want to. Now watch, if more happens under Trump, watch more happen under Trump, and then all of a sudden she'll be okay with calling it a genocide. How can you say this to these people? How can you say this to these people that have lost entire family lines? How can you just say, well, it's going to be really, really even worse under Donald Trump after you've killed all these people? I don't know why you keep this job, Joy. I don't know why you keep this job. And by the way, Joy Reid is Congolese. There is a genocide happening in the Congo. You would think she would understand. And maybe she does understand, but she pretends not to keep her job. So you can't tell me Joy Reid don't know about international affairs. She don't know about the genocides that's happening abroad. She is Congolese. Her people are actively being genocided right now.
Oh, sadly, Joy, it's happened very quickly. The Trump appointments, one is worse than the next. I was writing a Guardian column this week about the Trump cabinet and the hawks in the cabinet. I had to keep updating it before I could file the piece. Because every few minutes it was one more. It was Huckabee, then it was Hexeth. One hawk after another. Donald Trump is not a dove. Donald Trump is not a peacemaker. Anyone who believed that was, lying to themselves or deluded. Trump's first term showed us that he was a hawk on Israel and a hawk in general. The people he's appointed are just really out there. I mean, Peter Hexeth, who called for a preemptive strike on North Korea, is going to be in charge of the Defense Department and nuclear weapons. And on Israel.
Pause. So where was this commentary about all the war hawks and war criminals that Kamala Harris added to her campaign? Where was this? I didn't see Joy and Mehdi sit down and have a conversation about Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, like all these like warmongering Republicans that Kamala Harris was adding to her campaign. I didn't hear them say anything about this or have this conversation. What do you guys think would have happened under Kamala Harris? You really sit up here and think that Liz Cheney wouldn't have been added to Kamala Harris's cabinet? Kamala Harris told you right on The View, I'm going to have a Republican in my cabinet. I'm proud to have received an endorsement from Dick Cheney. Mr. Iraq War himself. These are terrible people. Terrible people. So my thing is just be consistent. That's all I'm asking for. Be consistent. Now all of a sudden you guys are going to pretend like you care. Now all of a sudden you care so much more about what's happening to the Palestinian people when you guys sat there and you made so many excuses for Joe Biden, for Kamala Harris. And like I said before, Joy Reid knows better. What a mess.
Israel, Palestine, where in a place like Dearborn, we saw a lot of Arabs understandably frustrated and enraged by what Biden and Harris did to Gaza, armed Netanyahu. Some of them, and I interviewed one of the imams from Michigan, fell into the trap of thinking Donald Trump would be not as bad or equally as bad or better. And we're seeing with Huckabee, I mean, Huckabee, Joy, and your intro is so important.
Pause. Let's go back to this for a second because, hold on.
Equally as bad or better. And we're
sorry, let's go back here. Listen to this.
Did to Gaza, armed Netanyahu. Some of them, and I interviewed one of the imams from Michigan, fell into the trap of thinking Donald Trump would be not as bad or equally as bad or better. And with
pause. So he interviewed one of the imams from Michigan, one person, and said, well, some of them thought that Donald Trump would be better or equally as bad. The majority of Muslim voters in Michigan did not think that. You see the propaganda? The majority of Muslim voters in Michigan did not think that. The majority of Muslim voters in Michigan basically were saying they're willing to accept it, right? We have to remember what happened with the vote. The majority of Muslim voters voted for Jill Stein. That right there tells you that the majority did not believe that Donald Trump would be the same or better. Jill Stein won the Muslim vote in Michigan and nationwide. So why are we, these are the things that people really got to understand. Mehdi Hasan interviewed one person, and he is talking about it as though that one person that he spoke to is speaking for everybody else. If you really want to know how the Muslim voters felt in Michigan, you can watch Ronnie Akalik was there. She was there when Donald Trump came to visit Dearborn. The majority of people were not happy to see him. The majority of Muslim voters did not want him there. It's all on camera. So these are the kind of things that you have to take into perspective. I don't want anyone walking away from the show thinking that all of the Muslim voters who voted for Trump thought that. That's not true. What ideally happened is that even some of them that were going to vote for Jill Stein or Cornel West decided in the end that they wanted to make sure that Kamala did not win. And they were concerned that if they were to all support Jill Stein, then Kamala could still win. So some of them, to punish Kamala, voted for Donald Trump. That does not mean that they thought he was going to be better. It was more so them wanting to punish Donald Trump. If you watch the interview of the members from Abandon Harris that Breonna Joy Gray just did recently on Bad Faith, watch the interview. They explain this. Watch the interviews I've done. Watch the ones we did on RBN with Abandon. They explain this, what happened. So I think it is disingenuous for Mehdi Hasan to pretend here and make it seem like, oh yeah, these people actually thought that Donald Trump was going to be so much better. That is a select few, not the majority. And not even half. Jesus Christ.
Seeing with Huckabee, I mean, Huckabee, Joy, and your intro is so important there. He's not just to call him an extremist is an insult to other extremists, right? He's so extreme, he makes Benjamin Netanyahu look moderate on Palestine. He makes George W. Bush look moderate on issues of war and peace. In 2008, Joy, Mike Huckabee criticized George Bush for setting a timetable for withdrawal from Iraq. He wanted to stay in Iraq for longer. He's a big Iraq war guy. And on Palestine, as you say, he calls himself an unreformed, unapologetic Zionist. He believes God gave the land only to the Jews. He's a religious fanatic. He refuses to admit that there's a Palestinian people. He says there's no occupation, no settlements, no West Bank, only Judea and Samaria. He wants one state, a Jewish state, no Palestinian state. It's a disaster in many ways. Obviously, the Palestinians are already living through a disaster in Gaza.
Yeah.
And then the West Bank, it's only going to get worse.
Pause, because he brought up the West Bank. The West Bank is getting worse right now under Biden as well. It's not like this is just going to start happening under Trump's administration. Don't forget, we covered the story about the biggest land expansion in the West Bank. We covered that story a couple of months ago, that they had already been given the green light to do that Israel already got the green light to do that. So I'm reminding you of this because come 2025, all of a sudden, liberals like Joy Reid and all the other commentators are going to pretend like that news story didn't happen. They're going to pretend like this all just happened under Trump's administration when they are already doing it now. So don't forget that. Jesus Christ. This is why Mehdi Hasan blocked me, because he knew what I said was true. When I told him is that the idea you don't reward people for a freaking genocide. He blocked me after that. You won't see him come on here and have this conversation because he knows what I'm saying is true. And Mehdi Hasan is a freaking propagandist his damn self. Don't get confused. Some of these commentators that left corporate media are still operating in a corporate way. They're still talking about the status quo. They're still repeating corporate media talking points. This is a fad. You saw it with Don Lemon, Chris Cuomo, Mehdi Hasan. These people, they're telling you they're independent. Are they truly independent? Who funded Zateo? Who funded this new news network of Mehdi? Where'd that money come from? Ask those questions. And two, if they were so fully removed from, why are they still going back onto corporate media? Why is Mehdi Hasan still coming back on to MSNBC, CNN? Why is he still coming into he is repeating the status quo and going with the status quo because he still wants to be able to be invited into those spaces. Never forget that. Don't fall for this.
You know, the idea of the way that power works is that you have to set yourself up in a position where you can negotiate. What the pro-Palestinian movement, and as you said, it's a righteous cause in the sense that these people are really suffering in Gaza. What they're now going to get is an administration that you can't even protest because you now have Pete Hegseth in charge of the military and Trump saying he thinks you should deport or shoot protesters. So now there's no avenue for protest at all. And this is the
pause. So let's think about what Joy just said. First of all, everyone has the right to protest in this country. But I want to be very clear about something. Obviously, I'm heavily against that. I'm heavily against Donald Trump trying to stop people to protest, stopping people from, expressing their voice. Heavily against that. Hell no. That being said, let's not sit here and pretend like the Biden-Harris administration didn't crack down on protests either. Let's not sit here and pretend like they didn't send in the police to crack down on the protesters. Let's not sit here and pretend that Kamala Harris didn't call the student protesters anti-Semitic. We covered that on this show. You literally had cops beating these kids. I saw videos of cops dragging faculty members on the ground. And all of them are going to forget these things happen come 2025. Watch. Watch. If the police attack protesters under Trump administration, watch how Joy Reid and all of them are going to change gears. Watch.
Piece you're talking about, this is the Guardian piece. You made a really good point that people voted for Trump in part, some of them, saying he was the peace candidate. He dropped more drones in 2 years than Obama dropped in 8.
So now all of a sudden you guys care about these wars, right? When people were complaining about the war in Ukraine, you were out there calling people Russian Putin puppets and all that. Now all of a sudden you care about how many bombs are dropped. Now all of a sudden you care about these wars. Now, to that point, I don't know why some people thought that Trump was anti-war or a peace person. I told you over and over on the show that was not the case. I told you about what happened under his presidency, whether it was Syria, whether it was Venezuela. I told you this over and over and over again. But for whatever reason, some people, and some of them were libertarians, some of them conservatives, some of them independent, some of them just like, I don't give a damn. For whatever reason, some people believe that because he didn't create a new war. I mean, just because you don't create a new war doesn't mean you're anti-war. You ain't stopped no damn wars either. So always keep that in mind. But now all of a sudden they care. Now they care about war.
Yeah. We've memory hold the first Trump presidency, the drone strikes, the killing of Qasem Soleimani, the bombing of Syria, the bombing of Iraq, the bombing of Somalia, the bombing of Afghanistan with the Moab, the mother of all bombs. This guy was not a peace candidate. In fact, he pardoned literal war criminals. And guess who told him to pardon those war criminals? Pete Hegseth, his new defense secretary. The guy running the Pentagon is the guy who thinks, war criminals, fine. So it's a very worrying state of affairs. I think if you're worried about war with Iran, you look at all the Iran hawks who are in the administration, Marco Rubio, its Secretary of State, very hawkish. Neocons, as I say in the Guardian piece.
Neocons. The same neocons that were a part of Kamala Harris's campaign? Joy, now all of a sudden it's neocons. It was no neocon when Liz Cheney was added to the ticket, was added to the campaign. What are you talking about? Neocons. Oh no, here come the neocons. Now all of a sudden everybody cares. You guys deserve to lose the ratings that you're losing. You guys deserve the drop off. You're so fake, and you can't even be fake the right way. God damn. Some people are at least good at being fake the right way. You're not even convincingly fake.
Trump has the same playbook. He attacks neocons on the campaign trail, wins, and then hires neocons. John Bolton in term one, Mike Pompeo, Nikki Haley, this time around Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, Elise Stefanik, Mike Huckabee, who's even worse than neocon. He's a Christian evangelical Zionist who thinks end of times is going to come about quicker if we have some major war on Israel's behalf in the Middle East.
Pause. I don't think Nikki Haley was hired. Last time I checked, Nikki Haley was not assigned. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I would have heard that announcement. I don't think Nikki Haley was hired at all. I think he's just adding in names.
Yeah, he's also hired an aide to Dick Cheney, even after having said that Dick Cheney's daughter should have guns trained on her face. Last thing.
Wait a minute. See, you see the tell? Dick Cheney. Where was this criticism about Dick Cheney when Kamala Harris bragged about Dick Cheney giving her an endorsement? Where was that same criticism, Joy? Yeah, exactly. Dick Cheney. Where was that? Not there. Not there. Where? I hope everybody sees the mask that has fallen off of MSNBC, CNN, all corporate media. I hope you guys see the mask that has fallen off. Now, all of a sudden, you care about Dick Cheney. Now, all of a sudden, Dick Cheney is a problem. But he wasn't a problem when he endorsed Kamala.
The ambassador from Israel to the U.S. is when he was young, was a Meir Kahane supporter. Yes. Just very quickly, who is Meir Kahane? Why should people know that?
Meir Kahane was an extremist, a terrorist. And this is not just me throwing out a name. The Jewish Defense League, which the new ambassador to the United States was a member of, was a designated terrorist organization until just a few years ago here in the United States. Think about how crazy that is. Netanyahu is sending a guy who the United States considered a member of a terrorist group to be the ambassador.
Sometimes elections have really terrifying consequences. Mehdi Hasan, thank you very much, my friend.
So here they are blaming the voters. Elections have terrible consequences. So it's not the voters' fault that Kamala Harris lost. It's Kamala Harris's fault. Because you know what? There are a number of people that said if she would have agreed to an arms embargo, if she would have agreed to a permanent ceasefire, Kamala Harris would have gotten her vote. And by the way, this is not just the Muslim community. There are a number of Democrats who said that, independents who said that, young voters who said that are not Muslim voters. It was not just the Muslim voting community that said, I'm not going to vote for you because of Israel and Gaza. I didn't vote for them. A lot of you didn't vote for them. It wasn't just the Muslim voters. So here they go with, well, these elections do have consequences. Bad tactic. Bad tactic. Don't blame the voters. Blame the candidate. Because if Kamala Harris really wanted those votes, she would have been able to agree to the demands that they wanted. You got a candidate out here. She wasn't even running on a goddamn real minimum wage amount for people. Couldn't even do the bare minimum of $15 minimum wage, which at this point is not even enough to survive off of. But she couldn't even do that. And you want to sit up here and point fingers at the voters. Get the fuck out of here, Joy. Ain't no joy with you, Joy. Ain't no joy with you. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.